On top of a hill, where the wind whispered through the trees and the sunsets painted the sky with golden hues, lived a girl named Lucia with her grandfather, Don Evaristo. Their home was a humble wooden cabin, with a small vegetable garden in the yard and a fireplace that was always kept burning on cold nights. Lucia loved her grandfather more than anything in the world. Since her parents had passed, he had been her refuge, her teacher, and her best friend. Together, they spent their days tending the land, gathering firewood, and sharing stories under the starry sky. But lately, her grandfather no longer had the same energy as before. His steps were slower, his gaze more tired, and his cough more frequent. Lucia noticed how the strong and protective man who had always embraced her was now struggling to get out of his armchair. "Grandfather, do you feel okay?" asked the girl with concern. "Don't worry, little one. It's just the weight of the years," he replied with a faint smile. However, Lucia knew it wasn't just that. Something deep inside her heart told her that her grandfather was sick, and that time was running out. That night, as the wind blew fiercely outside, Lucia knelt beside her bed and clasped her hands in prayer. "Dear God, please don't take my grandfather away. I don't know what I would do without him." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked out the window, searching for a sign, any answer. But she only saw the distant glow of the stars. The next day, when she woke up, Lucia made a decision. She would do whatever it took to save her grandfather, even if she had to travel the world to seek help. Lucia woke up with the first ray of sunlight shining on her face. She looked at her grandfather, still asleep in his old rocking chair next to the fireplace. His breathing was slow and heavy, and his skin seemed paler than the day before. The girl clenched her fists with determination. She couldn't stand by while her grandfather worsened. She had to find help. Quietly, she grabbed her small cloth backpack and put in a piece of bread, an apple, and a little bottle of water. Before leaving, she approached her grandfather and whispered in his ear, "Wait for me, Grandpa. I'm gonna find help." She left the cabin and began walking down the path that led to the nearest village. She knew it was a long and difficult journey, but her love for her grandfather drove her to keep going. As she walked, the sun climbed higher in the sky and the heat grew stronger. Lucia pressed the small medal her grandfather had given her when she was a child against her chest. "Whenever you need it, pray," he had once told her. "God always listens." With that hope in her heart, Lucia lifted her gaze to the sky and murmured, "Dear God, please help me find someone who can save my grandfather." The path was steep, her legs trembled from exhaustion, but she did not stop. What Lucia didn't know was that her journey was about to get even harder. The sun was high in the sky when Lucia arrived at the village. The heat seemed to embrace her strongly, and the dust from the road covered her shoes and dress. But her determination didn't falter. She knew she had to find someone who could help her grandfather. The village was full of people, but none seemed to notice the lonely girl walking between the houses. Lucia searched every corner, every alley, asking everyone she met if they knew someone who could help with a mysterious illness. But the answer was always the same: "We don't know anything about that, little one." Discouraged, but not losing hope, she headed to the central square. In the middle of the square stood an old church with a carved wooden door. The bell tower rang softly in the air, and a sense of peace filled Lucia as she approached. Inside, the cool air of the church surrounded her, and the soft glow of the candles illuminated the faces of the faithful who prayed in silence. Lucia, despite being a little girl, felt a deep peace being in that sacred place. She approached the altar, where a statue of the Virgin Mary looked at her gently. The girl knelt before her and, with a trembling voice, began to pray, "My mother, I know I am nobody important, but I ask with all my heart that you watch over my grandfather. I know you can do miracles. Please help me. I don't want to lose him." Her voice was a whisper, but the echo of her words seemed to fill the whole space. After a while, Lucia stood up, and with the feeling that something had changed, she left the church. As she walked through the square, an elderly woman stopped her. Her wrinkled face and snow-white hair reflected wisdom and compassion. The woman looked at Lucia with an intense gaze, as if she could see into her soul. "What troubles you, child?" asked the elderly woman, her voice soft like the breeze. Lucia, with renewed hope in her heart, explained her situation. "My grandfather is very ill. I've searched the whole village for help, but no one knows what to do. Could you help me?" she asked with tears in her eyes. The elderly woman looked at her for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Don't worry, child. Everything has its time, and maybe this is the moment when you must find the true help you seek." With a wave of her hand, the elderly woman led Lucia to a small shop at the end of the square, which Lucia had never noticed before. This place holds answers, Lucia thought. However, deep inside her, she felt that the journey had only just begun. The shop was small, almost hidden among the shadows of the larger buildings in the village. The wooden door creaked softly as it opened, and the air was filled with the scent of dried herbs and essential oils. Inside, shelves were filled with glass jars, old books, and strange objects that Lucia had never seen before. The elderly woman led her to a corner where a wooden table was covered with a linen cloth. On the table was a lit candle, its flame dancing gently, and resting on it was a small notebook. "This is a special place, child," said the elderly woman, as she sat down in a wooden chair. "Here is where the secrets of the soul and nature are kept. If you come with a pure heart and a sincere request, answers may come in ways you wouldn't expect." Lucia looked at her in amazement, not fully understanding what she was saying, but feeling deep inside that something profound was about to happen. The elderly woman gently opened the notebook and began to slowly turn the pages, as if searching for something. "Your grandfather has a very special connection with life and the earth. The illness that afflicts him is not only physical, but comes from a deeper, older place," explained the old woman without looking at Lucia, but with a voice that seemed to know exactly what the girl was feeling. "If you want to help him, you must find what is hidden in his soul, what he himself has forgotten." Lucia furrowed her brow, confused. "How can I do that?" she asked, her voice breaking with uncertainty. The old woman lifted her gaze and her eyes shone with serene wisdom. "The secret lies in the love you have for him. Sometimes what we need most is not medicine or magic, but reconnecting with what really matters. You, little one, have a mission, and it is not the one you think. You must remember what your grandfather taught you when you were younger." Lucia remained silent, processing the old woman's words. She then recalled her grandfather's teachings, those stories about faith, patience, and hope that he always told her before bed. She had been his joy, his light, and had learned from him to never give up, to trust that God always had a plan. The old woman closed the notebook and stood up. "Remember, child, true help doesn't always come from others. Sometimes the answer lies within you. Go and seek what your grandfather has given you." Lucia nodded, grateful but still full of questions. The old woman led her back to the door. "Go, and don't forget what you've learned. Love has the power to heal the deepest parts, beyond what the eyes can see." With one last look, Lucia left the shop, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and confusion. She didn't know what she would find, but something inside her told her that the journey to healing her grandfather had already begun. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and purple, as Lucia made her way back to the path that would lead her to the cabin. In her chest, she felt the weight of her love for her grandfather and the faith that God was guiding her. There was still much to discover, but she knew she wasn't alone. Lucia's journey was far from over. The return home was long and silent. Lucia walked with firm steps, but her mind was full of questions she couldn't answer. What did all the old woman's words mean? How could she help her grandfather with only what she had learned? When she arrived at the cabin, the sun had already set, and the light of the stars was beginning to shine in the sky. Lucia entered the house, where the fire in the hearth softly lit the small living room. Her grandfather was still in his chair, eyes closed, but his breathing had become calmer. Lucia approached him without saying a word and knelt beside him. For a moment, the whole world seemed to fade away, as if time itself had stopped. Only she and her grandfather remained, the man who had cared for her all her life. Gently, Lucia took the medal her grandfather had given her and held it in her hands. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and, as he had taught her, began to pray softly. "Little God, please help me to be strong. Help me to save my grandfather. I promise I won't give up, even though I don't understand how I'll do it. I know you hear my heart." The girl felt a warm sense of peace fill her. It was as if something greater than herself was around her, wrapping her in a soft light. In that moment, a clear thought appeared in her mind. What my grandfather has taught me is enough. Faith, love, patience. Everything he gave me is what I need to help him. In that moment, Lucia understood what she had to do. Without wasting any time, she stood up and went to the garden. There, in the little garden, her grandfather always cultivated the plants with love, believing that the earth had the power to heal. Lucia knew that her grandfather had taught her to care for the land with special devotion, and now she understood that perhaps this was the way to heal him. She took a shovel and began to dig with determination. She dug until she found the roots of a plant her grandfather had planted years ago. It was a common plant, but to him it had special meaning. He had told her it healed the pain of the body and soul. Lucia had never fully understood its meaning, but now she felt that this plant could be the key. With the roots in her hands, she returned to the cabin and carefully placed them next to the fireplace, where her grandfather rested. She took a bowl of water and added a few drops of lavender essential oil, as he used to do to calm himself, and then dipped the roots into the water. "Grandfather, this is what I need to do," she said with a firm voice, though filled with emotion. "If this isn't the way, I trust you'll show me another. But please join me in this prayer. You taught me to believe, and I will do the same for you." With her hands on the bowl, Lucia closed her eyes and began to pray once more. "Lord, I know my grandfather has faith, and I also believe in you. I ask that if this plant can help him, you grant it. If this isn't the way, guide me to the right one. But please heal my grandfather." The girl waited in silence, her eyes fixed on the roots floating in the water. For a few seconds, nothing seemed to happen, but something in the air shifted. The temperature in the cabin grew warmer, and a soft breeze entered through the window, as if an answer was coming. Lucia didn't fully understand what was happening, but her heart beat faster, full of hope. Now she knew that the power of love and faith could move mountains, even when miracles seemed impossible. The minutes passed, but for Lucia, time seemed to stretch endlessly. Her hands still rested on the bowl with the roots floating in the water, her gaze fixed on her grandfather. She didn't see any immediate sign of change, but something inside her told her that she should not abandon hope. Suddenly, a light cough broke the silence of the cabin. Lucia quickly looked up. Her grandfather, with effort, had opened his eyes and was looking at her with a soft and tired expression. There was something different in his face, a faint spark of life that she hadn't seen for days. "Lucia," he said, his voice weak but clear, "what are you doing?" The girl smiled with tears in her eyes and gently took his hand. "I'm taking care of you, Grandpa," she replied, her voice trembling. "I'm doing everything you taught me. This is what we have to do. Trust in God, in the earth, in the love we share. I'm here with you." Don Evaristo looked at the bowl with the roots floating in the water and at Lucia's expression, and something within him seemed to awaken. For the first time in days, his eyes showed a small spark of recognition and gratitude. However, he was still weak, and his breathing remained heavy. "Lucia, little one, I don't want you to suffer for me. I've had a full life, full of love," he said in a voice that was barely a whisper. Lucia shook her head, her eyes shining with determination. "Don't talk like that, Grandpa. I'm not going to leave you. You still have so much to teach me. And even though things seem difficult, I know God has a plan for us." The room was silent for a moment, only interrupted by the crackling of the fire in the hearth. The girl closed her eyes again, this time with the certainty that what she had done had a purpose beyond her understanding. The love she felt for her grandfather filled her with an inexplicable strength, a faith she had never felt so clearly. Suddenly, something happened. The light breeze that had entered through the window picked up a bit, and the fire in the hearth seemed to grow more intense. Lucia watched in amazement as the roots in the water began to emit a soft golden light, as if absorbing the energy from the surroundings. Her heart skipped a beat in her chest. "Grandpa, look!" she exclaimed, her voice full of wonder. Don Evaristo weakly lifted his gaze and saw the phenomenon before him. His face lit up with a faint but genuine smile. A deep silence enveloped the cabin, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire universe had aligned to witness the miracle. Lucia, with a mix of emotion and reverence, watched as the roots emitted a more intense light, as though responding to the prayer and the unwavering faith of the girl. The leaves of the plant, though already dry, began to move gently, as if awakening to new life. Don Evaristo slowly tried to rise from his chair. His body was still tired, but somehow the strength that had seemed to be lacking was returning to him. "Lucia," he whispered, his eyes filled with gratitude. I think you've done something I couldn't have done alone." With effort, the grandfather finally stood up, leaning on the back of the chair. Lucia watched him, her heart full of joy and relief. She didn't know if what was happening was a miracle, but she felt a deep peace fill the cabin. "Thank you, Lord," murmured Lucia, looking up at the sky through the window. Her faith had been tested, but now she understood that the miracle was not always something that could be seen immediately. Sometimes the miracle was in the love, the faith, and the power of believing when everything seemed lost. The golden light that emanated from the roots of the plant slowly faded, but the peace that had filled the space seemed to remain, like a silent answer to the girl's sincere prayer. She knew that her journey had not been in vain. Faith, love, and hope had done their part. Don Evaristo looked at Lucia, now with a sparkle in his eyes. "My girl, you've done more for me than you could ever imagine. You've restored my soul." Lucia hugged him, wordlessly, knowing that they didn't need to say anything more. Faith, love, and prayer had done what seemed impossible. The grandfather and the girl, together, looked at the hearth, still burning brightly, as a symbol of the life that had returned to the heart of the cabin, to their home. The miracle had happened. Dawn came softly, coloring the sky in warm tones and promising a new day. The cabin, which had always been a witness to the struggles and joys of Lucia and her grandfather, now seemed to breathe with renewed energy, as if life itself had returned to its walls. The fire in the hearth continued to burn, but with a serene peace that reflected the change that had occurred in their home. Don Evaristo, though still a little tired, no longer showed the same signs of weakness he had before. His eyes shone with a clarity they hadn't had in days, and his step, though slow, was firm. Lucia watched him with immense gratitude, knowing that something profound had happened that night, something that neither words nor science could explain. The girl, filled with curiosity and excitement, approached the bowl where the roots of the plant rested, now almost dry. The golden light that had emanated from it the night before had faded, but the sense of peace still lingered in the air. Lucia gently stroked the roots, feeling a deep connection to the mystery of what had happened. Don Evaristo approached, and with a smile that lit up his face, he said, "I think I understand now, Lucia. Faith is not just a word. It's the strength that moves us, that makes us keep going when everything seems lost. You showed me that last night. The faith you have, that faith that doesn't doubt even in the darkest moments, is the same faith that has returned life to me." Lucia looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "But Grandpa, I only did what you taught me. Everything I know about faith and love, I learned from you. You showed me how to trust in God and in the things we can't see. I did nothing more than what you asked me to do when you gave me this medal." The grandfather smiled, gently stroking the girl's head. "What you did, little one, was more than an act. It was a reminder for me. Sometimes we forget the power that love, prayer, and faith have. But you brought me back to that path. You've been my strength, my guide. And now, after all we've been through, I can say that I'm more than grateful for every day I have by your side." Lucia felt deeply moved, and for a moment, the silence between them was filled with mutual understanding, an understanding that didn't need words. The miracle that had occurred was not only a change in her grandfather's health, but in their connection, in their relationship, which was now stronger and deeper than ever. Together, they went outside, where the light of day enveloped them. The fresh morning air caressed their skin, and in that moment, Lucia felt that everything in the world was in its place. The earth, the sky, the sun, everything seemed to be in perfect harmony. Don Evaristo looked at her with a warm smile. "How about we go to the garden, little one? I think it's time we plant something new, something that will grow with everything we've learned." Lucia nodded, a smile full of hope on her face, and they took the gardening tools. As they walked toward the garden, Lucia couldn't help but feel a deep gratitude for everything she had lived through, for the faith that had grown in her heart, and for the miracle that had transformed both her life and her grandfather's. The girl looked up at the sky, thanking God for every step they had taken. She knew that, even though she didn't fully understand all the mysteries of life, something fundamental had changed. Love and faith were the seeds that mattered most, and they would always grow, no matter the circumstances. As they worked in the garden, surrounded by the earth they loved so much, Lucia understood that her true miracle wasn't just the healing of her grandfather, but the gift of their mutual love, which had been renewed and strengthened. Life would go on, with its challenges and blessings, but together, with faith, they knew they could face anything. Time passed, but the memory of that miraculous night remained forever in Lucia and her grandfather's hearts. Life on the hill continued its course, but now everything seemed to have an even greater purpose, a deeper reason. Every daily task, from caring for the garden to lighting the fire in the hearth, carried with it a sense of gratitude, renewal, and faith. Lucia became a young woman full of wisdom and love, thanks to the years spent with her grandfather. The lesson from that miracle accompanied her in every step of her life, reminding her that the answers to difficulties don't always come in visible ways, but love, prayer, and faith never fail. As they grew older, Lucia and Don Evaristo shared stories about the faith and the miracle that united them, and the small cabin on top of the hill became a refuge of hope for all those who needed a reminder of what truly matters: faith in God, unconditional love, and the strength found in the darkest moments. Years later, when Don Evaristo was no longer there, Lucia continued her grandfather's legacy. The garden flourished even more, and the plants that once symbolized a miracle of life now represented a promise of love and faith for those who came seeking comfort. Lucia, with a warm smile on her face, would tell the younger ones who came to her door, "Never underestimate the power of prayer and love. Miracles are not always seen, but they are always present in the hearts of those who believe." In her life, Lucia understood something essential. The true miracle was not in the plant or in her grandfather's healing, but in the transforming power of faith, which can heal more than bodies, can heal souls, and it can restore what seemed lost. Thus, the story of Lucia and Don Evaristo became a legend in the village, a testimony that faith not only moves mountains, but also shapes life itself.